Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. Author's note. No novelist dealing with Dark Age Britain dares venture into the light without some pen service to the place name problem. It is customary to explain one's usage, and I am at once less and more guilty of inconsistency than most. In a period of history when Celt, Saxon, Roman, Gaul, and who knows who else shuttled to and fro across a turbulent and divided Britain, every place must have had at least 3 names, and anybody's guess is as good as to what was common usage at any given time. Indeed, the given time of King Arthur's birth is somewhere around 470 A.D., and the end of the 5th century is as dark a period of Britain's history as we have. To add to the confusion, I have taken the source of my story, a semi-mythological romantic account written in Oxford by a 12th century Welshman, or possibly Breton, who gives the names of places and people what one might call a post-Norman slant with an overtone of clerical Latin. Hence, in my narrative, the reader will find Winchester as well as Rutipai and Dinas Emrys, and the men of Cornwall, South Wales, and Brittany, instead of Dumnonii, Demete, and Armoricans. My first principle in usage has been, simply, to make the story clear. I wanted, if possible, to avoid the irritating expendment of the glossary, which the reader has to interpret himself to look up the place names, or decide to read straight on and lose himself mentally, and non-British readers suffer further. They look up Caleva in the glossary and find it is Silchester, and are none the wiser until they consult a map. Either way, the story suffers. So, wherever there was a choice of names, I have tried to use the one that will most immediately put the reader in the picture. For this, I have sometimes employed the device of having the narrator give the current crop of names, even slipping in the modern one, where it does not sound too out of place. For example, Macebelly near Conan's Fort, or Caerconan, the men sometimes call it Conisburg. Elsewhere, I have been more arbitrary. Clearly, in a narrative whose English must be supposed in the reader's imagination to be Latin or the Celtic of South Wales, it would be pedantic to write of Londinium when it was so obviously London. I have also used the modern names of places like Glastonbury and Winchester and Tintagel because these names, though medieval in origin, are so hallowed by association that they fit contexts where it would obviously be impossible to intrude the modern images of, say, Manchester or Newcastle. These rules are not, of course, intended as a criticism of any other writer's practice. One employs the form the work demands, and since this is an imaginative exercise, which nobody will treat as authentic history, I have allowed myself to be governed by the rules of poetry. What communicates simply and vividly and sounds best is best. The same rule of ear applies to the language used throughout. The narrator, telling his story in 5th century Welsh, would use in his tale as many easy colloquialisms as I have used in mine. The servants, Cedric and Cadel, would talk some kind of dialect, while, for instance, some sort of high language might be expected from kings, or from prophets in moments of prophecy. Some anachronisms I have deliberately allowed, where they are the most descriptive words, and some mild slang for the sake of liveliness. In short, I have played it everywhere by ear, on the principle that what sounds right is acceptable in the context of a work of pure imagination, for that is all the Crystal Cave claims to be. It is not a work of scholarship, and can obviously make no claim to be serious history. Serious historians will not, I imagine, have got this far anyway, since they will have discovered that the main source of my storyline is Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. Geoffrey's name is, to serious historians, Mud. From his Oxford study in the 12th century, he produced a long, racy hodgepodge of history from the Trojan War, where Brutus, the king of the Britons, fought, to the 7th century A.D., arranging his facts to suit his story, and when he got short on facts, which was on every page, inventing them out of whole cloth. Historically speaking, Historia Regum Britanniae is appalling, but as a story it is tremendous stuff and has been a source of inspiration for a great cycle of tales called The Master of Britain, from Malory's Morte d'Arthur to Tennyson's Idylls of the King, from Parsifal to Camelot. The central character of the Historia is Arthur, king of the first united Britain. Geoffrey's archer is the hero of legend, but it is certain that Arthur was a real person, and I believe the same applies to Merlin, though the Merlin that we know is a composite of at least 4 people: prince, prophet, poet, and engineer. He appeared first in legend as a youth. My imaginary account of his childhood is colored by a phrase in Malory, the well of Galapus. So, Fontus Galapus is sometimes translated, where he wont to haunt, and by a reference to my master Blaise, who becomes in my story Belasius. The Merlin legend is as strong in Brittany as in Britain. 1 or 2 brief notes to finish with. I gave Merlin's mother the name Ninian because this is the name of the girl, Vivian Ninian de Meaux, who, according to legend, seduced the enchanter in his dotage and so robbed him of his powers, leaving him shut in his cave to sleep till the end of time. No other women are associated with him. There is so strong a connection in legend, and indeed in history, between celibacy or virginity and power, that I have thought it reasonable to insist on Merlin's virginity. Mithraism has been literally underground for years. I have postulated a local revival for the purpose of my story, and the reasons given by Ambrosius seem likely. From what we know of the real Ambrosius, he was Roman enough to follow the soldier's god. Bede, the 7th century historian, calls him Ambrosius a Roman ecclesiastical history of the English nation. And the ancient Druids, or about the ancient Druids, so little is known that according to the eminent scholar I consulted, they can be considered fair game. The same applies to the megaliths of Carnac, Carrick in Britain, and to the giant's dance of Stonehenge near Amesbury. Stonehenge was erected around 1500 BC, so I only allowed Merlin to bring 1 stone from Kildare. At Stonehenge, it is true that 1 stone, the largest, is different from the rest. It comes originally, according to geologists, from near Milford Haven in Wales. It is also true that a grave lies within the circle. It is off-center, so I have used the midwinter sunrise rather than the midsummer one, toward which the dance is oriented. All the places I describe are authentic, with no significant exception but the cave of Galapus, and, if Merlin is indeed sleeping there, with all his fires and traveling glories around him, one would expect it to be invisible. But the well is there on Bryn Myrthan, and there is a burial mound on the crest of the hill. It would seem that the name Merlin was not recorded for the falcon Columbarius until medieval times, and the word is possibly French, but its derivation is uncertain, and this was sufficient excuse for a writer whose imagination had already woven a series of images from the name before the book was even begun. Where Merlin refuses the potter's mark, A.M., or where Merlin refers to the potter's mark, A.M., the A would be the potter's initial or trademark. The M stands for Manu, literally by the hand of. The relationship between Merlin and Ambrosius has, I believe, no basis in legend. A 9th century historian, Nennius, from whom Geoffrey took some of his material, called his prophet Ambrosius. Nennius told the story of the dragon in the pool, and the young seer's first recorded prophecy. Geoffrey, borrowing the story, calmly equates the 2 prophets. They saith Merlin, that is also called Ambrosius. This throwaway piece of nerve, as Professor Gwyn Jones calls it, Introduction to the Everyman edition of History of the Kings of Britain, gave me the idea of identifying the Prince of Darkness who fathered Merlin, gave me indeed the main plot of the Crystal Cave. My greatest debt is obviously to Geoffrey of Monmouth, master of romance, among other creditors too, numerous to name and impossible to repay. I should like especially to thank Mr. Francis Jones, County Archivist, Carmarthen, Mr. and Mrs. Morris of Bryn Murthen, Carmarthen, Mr. G.B. Lancaster of the Chase Hotel, Ross on Wye, Brigadier R. Waller of Waston Lees, Monmouthshire, on whose land lie Lesser Doward and the Romans' Way, Professor Herman Brooke, Astronomer Royal for Scotland, and Mrs. Brooke, Professor Stuart Pigott of the Department of Archaeology at Edinburgh University, Miss Elizabeth Manners, headmistress of Felixstowe College, and Mr. Robin Dennison of Hodder and Stoughton Limited, London, February 1968 to February 1970. Mary Stewart. Acknowledgements. Edwin Muir's poem Merlin is reprinted by permission of Faber and Faber Limited from the collected poems 1921 to 1958. The poem on page 152 is a free translation of the verses appearing in Barza's Brits, Chants Populaires de Brittany by the Vicomte de la Villemarquis, Paris 1867. The legend of Merlin is based on the translation of Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, which was first published in the Everyman's Library, volume 577 by J. and M. Dent in 1912. A note about the author. Mary Stewart, one of the most popular novelists writing today, was born in Sunderland County, Durham, England. After boarding school, she received a BA with first-class honors in English literature and literature from Durham University, and went on for her MA. Later, she returned to her own university as a lecturer in English. She married in 1945. Her husband is Sir Frederick Stewart, who is chairman of the Geology Department at Edinburgh University and a Fellow of the Royal Society. Lady Stewart's career as a novelist began in 1954 with the publication of Madam Will You Talk? Since then, she has published 15 successful novels, including The Last Enchantment, the third book of this magical trilogy about the legendary Merlin and young Arthur. Her books for young readers, The Little Broomstick and Ludo and the Star, The Little Broomstick, 1971, and Ludo and the Star Horse, 1974, quickly met with the same success as her other novels. In 1968, she was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. In 1971, the Scottish chapter of the International Pen Association awarded her the Frederick Niven Prize for The Crystal Cave. In 1974, the Scottish Arts Council award went to Ludo and the Star Horse. So that is all there is of The Crystal Cave to read you. The next book in the series is The Hollow Hills. I'm still waiting for somebody to ask me to read it. I will once that happens. There is so much more to read, though, and I look forward to seeing you in the next read aloud.